and welcome to another episode of Pushing Boundaries, a podcast where we discuss development, career, and growth by talking to some of the most incredible, inspiring people out there. And our guest today is Sowmya Subramanian, somebody who has inspired me and whose journey has given us a lot of inspiration and hope. Sowmya is a trailblazer in the media and tech industry and has led some of the most innovative digital transformation across Microsoft, Oracle, YouTube, Google, and most recently at Warner Media. Sowmya was one of the main people behind the successful launch of Mac streaming service. And prior to that, she has led the growth and incubation at YouTube Kids, YouTube Music, and YouTube Live. We know Sowmya is an innovator. We know her expertise in engineering. But I think deep down somewhere, she has this knack of pulling in the nuances of the human behavior and psychology and using that to build cutting edge technology at YouTube and some of the other consumer tech she has built. Her advocacy for women in workplace and her pioneering vision has made her such an inspiring figure for a lot of us. And I am so humbled and honored to welcome Sowmya to our podcast today. Welcome, Sowmya.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's such a great honor. And I am so happy that I'll tap into your brain and really learn so much from you today. So I hope you're ready for it because I am.
Great. I am. Let's see. And I'm going to learn a lot from you too.
Great. So we should start. I wanted to really talk a little bit about your journey and really understand what was your childhood like. So if you could take us back and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Before I go into my childhood, I just want to say again, thanks for having me on this podcast and for doing this podcast series. When you pitched the idea to me, I knew I wanted to be a part of it, to support it. And I think both your participants and your listeners, all of us are going to benefit from it. So thank you. So my journey, so I, grew up in India, in Chennai, Madras. That's where I was born. And for my middle school, we were actually in Nigeria. So most of my middle school I did in Lagos, Nigeria. And then we came back to India, but Calcutta or Kolkata now. And I did my high school there before coming to the US for my undergraduate and graduate degrees. So traveled the world always growing up. My mom was a math teacher, and my dad was an architect. Their professional lives influenced me quite significantly, and my own interests were math and physics, and I enjoyed doing those, which pretty much got me to where I am today.
Wow, that's incredible. So your childhood, you stayed in three different continents, and I'm sure hopping from one continent to the other has really shaped the way you are and the way you adapt to change. And I'd love to listen into one of your early memories of something that really struck with you and then that shaped you into who you are today and something that you take with you everywhere. So
yeah, I'll focus on my school years. What got me really interested into this intersection of technology and creation, if you will. So, we had a Atari computer at home, and I was playing with it. And before I knew programming or any of that, I just kind of, was tinkering with it. I used to like tinkering with things. And I came across BASIC. We had a BASIC cartridge, so I plugged it in, and one thing led to the next. And suddenly I figured out that I could write programs that would make this computer solve my math problems for me. And that was an aha moment. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Later, just a few years later, I think it was in ninth grade, we had at school, NIIT was the company. They offered a Logo programming class. And for those who don't know, Logo is like this cursor movement language. You can make the cursor move by writing code, and it'll draw things for you on the screen. And as I was playing with it, I had been trying to draw the side profile of Mahatma Gandhi on my own, just for fun, on paper and pen. And one day I was like, why don't I just try writing a program to do this? So I did write it in Logo, and it was so delightful to see this creative thing come to be by writing a few lines of code. And it wasn't just that, you could also alter it very
Mhm.
easily, right? You don't have to
Mm.
restart all over. You can scale it up, you can make it bigger, you can make it smaller, you can change the ratios, you can color it, you can shade it. So there's just so much to it that could be
Yeah.
done, and the creativity that it unlocked,
Yeah.
which was not always obvious, at least until then, that
Mm.
programming resulted in that. And it
Yeah.
was that connection of how technology can be applied to
Mm.
these real world things and to creative things
Yeah.
that drew me to it.
Yeah.
Um, and I did my undergrad at Mount Holyoke College, which is a liberal arts college.
Uh-huh.
And in an environment like that, you naturally kind of are exposed to a broad variety
Mm.
and interdisciplinary things that
Yeah.
allowed me to continue to keep uh, going deeper and deeper into that intersection of technology and user problems and human computer
Yeah.
interaction, all of that
Yeah.
put together.
Yeah. That's amazing. And what I'm also hearing is that you use something that you were good at and that you loved, which was coding and engineering, to do something that you were probably not so good at or you were struggling with, which was the side profile of Mahatma Gandhi. And I mean, obviously, in today's day and age, we use AI to do so much more, but you did that way back then and really tapped into your scientific and analytical brain to do something creative. And that's incredible. And it's such a lesson for so many people out there and so many kids out there that are constantly struggling with one thing. And I think what you're saying is you can use your strength to achieve whatever you set your mind to, because there's no one path. There's so many ways to achieve what you want to achieve. And you showed that with your example. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Great. All right, Samya. So now that we know a little bit about you, I also wanted to dive into something that's super important. And I think you're in a perfect place to answer that. And the question is, what is the true essence of leadership in your dictionary?
Yes. I think leadership comes in many, many different forms and
Hmm.
shapes.
Hmm.
And and you can be a leader even when you're a student or even when
Yeah.
you're a
Not
kid.
even a formal title, basically.
Yeah, the essence of leadership. I think it's a
Hmm.
couple of things for me. If I had to summarize it in three main themes, one is about really having that curiosity and
Hmm.
the hunger to try and do the best that you can with others
Yeah.
to make something happen.
Hmm.
So I think that is one key part of leadership is how can I really uh, genuinely be interested in solving this
Yeah.
problem. And it's not just about me solving this problem. It's working with whomever else I need to work
Yeah.
with and together solving that problem. So that is a
Yeah.
key part of it.
Yeah.
The other thing around leadership is integrity. And
Mm.
that is something becomes more and more important as you take on more formal leadership roles as well,
Yeah.
um, as to uh, how what are the core values you stand for as an
Mm.
individual, as a
Mhm.
company, as a team, and how can you lead with that integrity that reinforces
Yeah.
the values that you
Yeah.
stand for in your actions, in how you interact with others, in how you deliver, and how you handle situations. You're going to have good and bad situations, and
Of
how do you
course.
work through those? And the third thing is about being yourself as you lead through things and being prepared in some way. Like
Yeah.
I believe in being prepared. In fact, people who work with me hear me say this all the time, like, how do we minimize negative surprises? Like
Yeah.
as a leader, how do I minimize negative surprises for my team?
Mhm.
As a person in the organization, how do you
Mhm.
minimize negative surprises for your peers, for your leadership? And you know it's a way of saying, how do you stay prepared
Mm.
um, and look a few steps ahead and
Mm.
create an environment where um, you can stay calm through those ups and
Yeah.
downs or
Yeah.
changes that happen.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it's those three things. One is really being curious and giving it your best shot, working not just by yourself, but with everyone around you to make
Yeah.
things happen.
Yeah.
The second is integrity and knowing
Mm-hmm.
what are the core values you stand for,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of living it.
Yeah.
And the third is being prepared, uh, and being intentional in how you're
Yeah.
prepared.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. And I think it's so often that these are such core values to leadership. And I mean, I can see that that's truly your authentic leadership that comes through, because you work as a team and you let your team come up with ideas, and then you work together and achieve that goal. And you're
Yeah.
intentional about it, and you're prepared about it. And there's an integrity element to it because you're all working towards that goal. That makes great teams, and that makes great products, and you can vouch for that. You've
Yes,
got a
I
few of
can.
them, so that's amazing. But we all know, and you touched upon it, right? Even as a leader of working for some of the biggest companies and some of the most successful products, everyone gets setbacks and some sort of challenges that they face, right? And I'm sure you have had your fair share. I've had my fair share. And that has shaped your leadership style in a certain way, right? So I'd love to tap into that and understand what are some of those challenges that you saw and then you overcame, and that has shaped your leadership style.
Yeah. I think like challenges come in many different forms
Mm-hmm.
too. So maybe we can put them in a few buckets, right? One is very product and tech focused, which is
Yeah.
how do you, when you see a need for something
Yeah.
and you have very strong conviction in it, how do you, and others are not quite there yet, how
Mm-hmm.
do you convince and bring people along
Yeah.
to make it happen, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's one kind of a challenge in some way. The other is we are women in tech, and uh, whether you define yourself by your gender or not,
Mm-hmm.
uh, um, people around you might, and that comes with its
Fair
plus and
share.
minus,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
its share of challenges, and how do you handle that. um, and then the third is like, what is
Mm.
the mindset you bring
Yeah.
uh, to things, because you're never in a perfect scenario, like you
Mm.
don't control all the variables.
Yeah.
So there are certain things you control, but many things you don't
Yeah.
actually. So even if you're like doing your best and you're doing everything, may not, something might suddenly shift.
Yeah.
So how do you handle that kind of change, and what is the mindset you bring to it? I think so. Those are.
Yeah, I think my big takeaway is staying calm and being able to handle challenges is a big part of leadership, because you can't avoid them. Like, however much prep, as you had mentioned in the last point, sometimes those challenges will happen and you will just have to deal with it and then build influence in a way that you're
Yeah.
still pushing the needle and working towards the goal. One thing I wanted to touch upon, which you kind of mentioned earlier, was building influence, ensuring that everyone's on the same page. And alignment is such a big part of leadership, too. One of the things that some of the women that I have mentored have constantly struggled with, and I'm also constantly learning and tweaking it, is how to build executive presence and how to build that influence. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, yeah. We're all learning. So, there are things that have worked, and the same thing doesn't work the next time, and you're like, oh, what happened here?
Yeah.
And you're constantly like, it's a trial and error. There are many examples, both in YouTube, at Google, and
Hmm.
even more recently. For instance, I still remember in YouTube, as we were shifting from being really like a cat videos monolith to uh,
That was a
like
day.
that was the day, and now we're trying to become that again. I feel I saw the gaps and the needs for YouTube music, like verticalized
uh,
experiences like
yeah.
music, and hey, for kids, and there's so many people watching sports on all these other places, and this was before
Yeah.
ESPN2 and things
Yeah.
existed. And I was like, we should totally be doing live streaming and pay-per-view sports. So when you're pitching an idea like that,
Mm.
um, I think there are a couple of things, and I learned it iteratively
Yeah.
through. I did YouTube Live and sports first, and pay-per-view sports.
Yeah.
Some things worked, some things didn't, and then I took that and I improved on it for
Right.
YouTube Music,
Right.
and then I kind of used that to improve on it for YouTube Kids.
Yeah.
Is the more you can align your idea and the
Mhm.
pitch and the
Mhm.
need that you're seeing
Mhm.
with the broader strategy of the company,
Mhm.
it works. So the company can be the whole company, like it could be
Yeah.
all of Google, it could be just YouTube. If you're doing within a certain team, maybe
Yeah.
it's in the context of that team and the organization. What are you trying to achieve, right?
Yeah.
So knowing what are the success look like for
Mm.
the overarching company or the organization,
Mhm.
and then how does this idea enable us to get there?
Yeah.
And the more you can align yourself that way, the better.
Yeah.
Now, it's not always obvious when you start how to do that alignment,
Yeah.
because maybe your idea is actually tangential to what's going on,
Yeah.
which happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to. I think that is where it's like solving a puzzle. You need to figure out,
Yeah.
how do I thread the needle in a way, and is there a needle to be? Is there something to be threaded here?
True.
And there are times where there isn't something to be threaded, and
Mm.
maybe you do have to move teams or move companies to achieve. If you have that much conviction in that idea and you
Yeah.
think it is definitely something you would like to do, you think
Right.
it's something people should do, and you
Yeah.
want to be involved in it, you might have to make a change.
Yeah, that's amazing advice, and I've some experience with startups too. And one of the things that I've learned over the course of my career, if I can take something that you mentioned, is if you have so much conviction in an idea and you're not getting the alignment or the approvals, then test it out. Test out your theory. Do a quick A/B test. Do a proof of concept, and show the value. And that value
Yeah,
should be aligned to the company's overall vision,
yeah,
right? And it doesn't have to be at a scale that YouTube is operating at. But it could be a proof of
yeah.
concept or some idea where once you're able to show that value and hopefully people understand that this could scale very well, it helps, right? Sometimes it does.
Yeah,
Sometimes even that doesn't, but
and it doesn't, and that's okay. I think
yeah,
because you learn from that and
yeah,
you iterate further again.
right.
And anytime a new idea comes in,
Yeah,
I think you will more likely to have more naysayers than everyone immediately saying, yes, of course, let's do this.
yeah.
And I still remember when I first started product inclusion, it was a
Mm,
20-person project on the
mm,
side. But I saw a gap in our products, in our
mm,
experiences, where I was like, hey, we are supposed to be an open democratic platform.
mm.
And we still have a lot of the biases that mainstream media seem to have.
Ah,
And why is that? And it was very puzzling for many people. Everyone was like, no, 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 that can't be true. We're like,
yeah,
we don't have gatekeepers. We don't
yeah,
do this. But then when you start digging into it, the way we were training our algorithms is
yeah,
all based on user behavior.
yeah,
So if consumers are clicking more on male science creators, for instance, than
yeah.
female science creators, then the algorithm starts
To
rewarding more
bias
and more
that.
male
Yeah,
create, and that bias comes in. So there are different kinds of biases, so we had to kind of peel back.
yeah.
And I took everyone who said no, this is not possible, and I engaged with them to say,
Mm,
tell me more, like why, what,
yeah,
let me come back with a little bit more data. And there were many people who were saying, we've seen this too. So we gathered um, momentum with
mm,
a lot of people who saw the problem
yeah,
with different skill sets,
yeah.
not just engineers, but I brought people of
Mm,
different backgrounds from across the company
mm,
together. And we kept making the case stronger and stronger.
yeah,
um, and that led the way to what is now product inclusion. ML bias
yeah,
efforts started, machine
yeah.
learning biases, data biases.
Mm,
And now everyone takes it for granted, but
yeah,
back then it was not that obvious. So
yeah,
I think,
yeah.
and tying it back to your question about executive presence, I think
Mm,
that in a way, I think executive presence is about having the confidence to be able to take criticism or no's and turning that around into advocacy
Yeah.
for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing. And I think if I can tie it back to our podcast also, what you're just explaining is how we can push boundaries by not accepting a no at face value, but also sort of constantly pushing and evolving ourselves and our theory and our hypothesis with data backing it. And as you spoke about algorithmic bias, which is so true. I mean, there's data till date that has biases in it, and it's going to take some time before the systems can completely get away with the biases, because that's was the behavior of humans for the longest time, and that is what has trained the models today. So obviously we can't let it go, but it's good to be aware of it, and it's good to make decisions based on knowing that that's part of the system today. I love the fact that you didn't give up on it and you dug it out and proved it in a way that was enlightening for everyone. So that's amazing. I'd love to sort of talk a little bit now about what kind of actionable advice would you be able to share with everyone who's trying to get into a new leadership role and really trying to understand how they can be an effective leader?
Yeah, I think couple of things. One is, I've always followed what I find interesting, and the mission or the vision or the idea has to resonate for me.
Mm,
The opportunity might be super cool and interesting, and maybe
mm,
I get a very big title or a big career leap. But if the space is not resonating for me, I
mm,
usually peel back, and that's worked okay for me. I think
mm,
I've done okay. So I think that's something to figure out for yourselves, is how much of the idea needs to speak to you, or the
mm,
space needs to speak to you,
mm.
um, in the direction that you pursue. I think that
Yeah,
that's one thing.
yeah.
The second is, leadership growth comes in many forms.
Mm-hmm.
uh, I think my strength always was being able to kind of look a little ahead and look at where the
Yeah,
next need or the next
yeah,
break is going to come from,
yeah.
and how do we build ourselves towards that,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we build our systems for it, how do we design for it.
Yeah.
And I realized very early on that I can't do it all by myself. So I was really good at working as a team, which then
Mm-hmm.
attracted people to be on my team. And I think that's part of that authentic leadership. Like,
Yeah,
what type of influence you want to have,
yeah.
and what type of influence will give you satisfaction in
Mm-hmm.
the outputs that you can drive.
Yeah,
So I think that's the second advice I would give, is learn by trying. And so each person's style is different, and
correct.
knowing what your style is,
Yeah,
uh, and how do you drive leadership
yeah,
playing to your style and your strengths,
exactly.
I think is a key second thing I would say.
Yeah.
And third is, keep an open mind,
Mm-hmm.
try. I think particularly now, and it's always been true, but even more so now,
Mm-hmm.
uh, even the experts have no clue what's going on, right? Like, we're all
Yeah,
learning, and
yeah,
things are changing at such a fast pace.
yeah.
And techniques are going to change. Techniques
Mm,
and the approaches we take are going
yeah,
to change. How I did evaluations for YouTube safety classification for YouTube Kids,
yeah,
great that I have that experience,
yeah,
but it doesn't mean that if I didn't have that experience, or I can just take that experience and
yeah,
apply it
yeah,
to the next LLM that's
yeah.
happening out there.
Yeah.
The parameters are changing a lot
Mm,
and very, very fast.
yeah.
So I think having a little bit of that openness and curiosity is going to make leaders stronger leaders.
And yeah, I think you touched upon a really important point that we are in this time of change. And coming back to something that you had said about your journey and the fact that because you moved continents so early on in
Yes.
life and you've embraced change is something that is a big takeaway lesson for me as well. Because I mean, we can all fight the change and say, "Oh, we've been doing it the certain way and now everything is changing." But that's the sort of truth about our lives. Things change constantly, and the more you embrace change and the more you're able to sort of continue doing what you're doing, and with the new circumstances, with the new tool sets, as in we all have a new AI tool set in our back pocket now, right? I think one of the big lessons that I'm also gathering from you is sort of embrace change and be open and curious about where
Yeah,
things would land for you, right?
I think so. Yes, absolutely. And because this podcast is focused on women and women in leadership, there are times where I think even to this date, you
Mm-hmm.
might be the only woman in the room, or
Mm.
a very small number are there.
Yeah.
And my ask of people would be a couple of things. No matter which level you're in, you
Mm.
have the opportunity to turn and pull others
Yeah.
along.
Yeah.
So, as a student, you can be a mentor. As a new college grad, you can go help with recruiting. As a senior leader, you can create opportunities or mentor
Yeah.
others or open doors that were not opened for
For
you, but
you.
now you are in
Correct.
a position to open
Yes.
them for others.
Yes.
So I think I would encourage people to do that,
Yeah.
women to do that,
Yeah.
and to support each other. And really, this turn and pull was a phrase I learned in sports, and I think it stuck with me. You're in a meeting, you're in a room, a discussion is going on, and you see an angle that nobody else is seeing,
Yeah.
and and but if you're seeing it, probably there's something there.
Yeah.
So don't be shy or tentative
Yeah.
or afraid to say it.
Present your idea. Yeah. Yeah.
Because let's say you say it and it was totally wacko, so
Yeah.
what, big deal,
Yeah. Yeah.
then you can back off. But
Yeah.
but if you never voice it, then nobody has heard it, and you've not even
Exactly.
given it a chance to be tested.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
yeah.
And that was, I mean, that was something that my executive coach constantly reminded me, because I, like you said, was constantly fearing that I have this very diverse perspective on certain things because everybody else in the room doesn't have the background that I have. And, so I would always shy away from, no, should I put my point forward? And what if they don't take it? What if they don't understand? A lot of times I didn't, because of the fear of, oh, what are they going to think, that I've not thought this through and whatnot. But the few times I have, the idea was well received. And sometimes, even if it was not taken forward, we've come back to the table and realized that we should have had. And that is a place of strength. And that showed me that my lack of boldness was something I needed to work upon, because that's something that we can continue to really push forward. Because, yeah, a lot of time women have that diverse perspective. It's just how we are wired, but we're fearing that rejection, and we don't go forward and say that. So thank you for acknowledging that. I am acknowledging that I'm still struggling with it, and I'm hoping that, after this conversation, a few people out there will really push their boundaries and say, okay, I'm going to do that thing, and even if it feels scary, we should do it. So I am so glad we had this conversation, Sowmya. I'm thrilled to be able to tap into your brain and really understand a little bit more about how you operate. And I'm so glad that you took the time and came to this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this and having me.
Thank you.